Hi, everybody. My name is Cecily Schreiber, and this is my Zoom video on our poetry analysis. I found this poem under Volume B in our book, under Medieval China, under Tang Poetry, and then under the writer Li Bo. And the title of my poem is The Sun Rises and Sets. And so I'm gonna read quickly through it, and then we'll dive right in. So. The sun comes up from its nook in the east, seems to rise from beneath the earth, passes on through heaven, sets once again in the western sea. And where, oh where, can its team of six dragons ever find any rest? Its daily beginnings and endings since ancient times, never resting. And man is not made of its primal stuff. How can he linger beside it long? Plants feel no thanks for their flowering in spring's wind, nor do trees hate losing their leaves under autumn skies. Who wields the whip that drives along four seasons of changes? The rise and the endings of all things is just the way things are. Zai, Zai, why must you always drown yourself in those wild and reckless waves? What power has Luang that he halted your course by shaking his spear? This perverts the path of things. Errs from heaven will. So many lies and deceits. I'll wrap this mighty mudball of a world all up in a bag and be wild and free like chaos itself. All right, so now we're going to talk about three things. We're going to talk about the historical context, the poem structure, and then the poetic devices that are used throughout this poem. So I'll start with the historical context. It was written during the Tang Dynasty, as we know, about the 8th century. When you read this, there is a lot of Chinese mythology and Chinese cosmic beliefs in this. The sun is seen as like a celestial being, something that rules the earth or directs the earth's path. We see a couple of gods mentioned, Luang and Zai, and here's a couple of them. I have Zai highlighted in orange here. And there's just a couple of different suggestions and words that really hint that we're viewing this from a Chinese cosmic perspective. And they do mention heaven, but then they really rely on these like little g gods. There's a lot of them. The dragons that go across, that is a Chinese myth or belief that the dragons are right here. It says the team of six dragons are like directed by a god that drags the sun and all that such. So I had a source. The title of it was Automatic Recognition of Illusions in Tang Poetry. It talked a little bit about the history of Tang poetry and then it talked about the illusions. And so it worked good because I used it for both of the topics that we were talking about today. One quote that I found really interesting said, Tang poetry is another monument after the Book of Songs in the history of Chinese poetry. Tang poetry often expresses rich ideological significance in a concise form. And so the ideological significance in this specific poem is human life and the really like little significance that humans have in the influence of the earth and comparing our human limitation to these celestial gods they believe in. And then another quote from this specific um, source was the Tang Dynasty intellectuals had broad visions, rich knowledge, structure, and the illusions they quoted almost all over the classic literature before the Tang Dynasty. So they used a lot of illusions in this, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But so that's a little bit about the historical context, and now we'll talk about the poem structure. This poem really does not have any structure that is able to study. We have about two stanzas. So down here we have a break right before we talk about this god Z, and then so there's two stanzas, and the lines are not similar at all. So we have like one longer here, and then shorter down here. We see that. We see questions. We see no rhyming, no rhyme schemes. So like east, earth, heaven, sea, dragons, rest. Maybe one or two of the words rhyme, but nothing consistent. There's nothing in this poem that's consistent. A lot of it is irregular. A lot of it is free verse. It's very conversational. It's very written in a way of it's a conversation in one's head or maybe like a speech or a conversation out loud just to yourself. It's not very, very formal. It does not follow a normal meter. Um, and it, like I talked about, just has that one break. And there's no rhyme scheme and there's no specific pattern. So not a lot to say about the poem structure here. But I'll get into the poetic devices now. I have highlighted some of the ones that we will talk about. And so first it's um, imagery. We'll talk about that. So the highlighted in blue is imagery. So I have the Western Sea, this all gives the reader perspective, um, and just helps give the reader's brain more time to understand this and really soak in what this is meaning. And so I have autumn skies, so that could hint like fall and beautiful colors and sunsets. And that's kind of what I think of that. Wild and reckless waves, that hints danger. That gives me worry and fear. All right, and the next, I have a rhetorical question right here. Who wields the whip that drives along four seasons of changes? No one's supposed to answer. It's just something to thought provoke the readers. I have symbolism right here. Um, Plants feel no thanks for their flowering in spring's wind, nor do trees hate losing their leaves under autumn skies. That kind of overlapped, but all of that would be in yellow. I saw this as a symbol of change, as a symbol of um, life cycles and inevitable things that humans can't change, because we really talk about that in this poem. And then there's a hyperbole down here. I'll wrap this mighty mud ball of a world all up in a bag. You cannot wrap the world up in a bag. And so this is just over exaggeration on this. And then lastly, I'll talk about repetition here. It's really supposed to make the point and make the dramatic effect to this poem. Thank you so much for listening. This was my poetry analysis, and um, have a great day. Let's see.